Okay, so let's get started. So welcome to this MMT Tech Meetup, August 2020. And we basically have, we used to run these MMT Tech Meetups in London, UK. And they were really well received. And what we're now trying to do is put this online. So the Tech Meetup today is going to be covering a good set of topics, and in particular, Gatsby. So let's get started. Okay, so just a quick introduction on my side. My name is Ilesh Mistry. I run the MMT Tech Meetups. I'm a CMS specialist and a content MVP. And I work for a company called MMT Digital, who are based in the UK. And if you want to get any of my details or contact me in any sort of way, then you can utilize the QR code and you can see some contact details from myself. Just to quickly, give some shout outs here in the sense of like MMT Digital, because they're allowing us to do the tech meetups, and then Gatsby as well, because really happy to kind of be helping present some aspects of Gatsby, but also we've got a very good member of the Gatsby community, the founder himself, Kyle Mathews, talking later as well. Okay, so a quick thing about the MMT Tech Meetups. Just want to really see if if anyone wants to get involved, then drop me a line, and then we can kind of go from there for future ones. There are sort of like a few things that we've done on here, like add your questions to the chat. There is a listen only mode, but we can enable that as well, and the sessions will be recorded. And if you can, it would be great if you can, add this to social media, as it would be really appreciated. Thank you. To talk about today's sessions, we've got myself. I'm going to be talking about briefly about Gatsby recipes, what they are and how we can use them. And then Kyle's going to talk about the Gatsby overview, which will cover Gatsby recipes as well. And this is to just sort of like give you a good sort of like understanding of where they are in sense of what Gatsby are doing now and the future plans that they have. Okay, so Gatsby recipes from myself. So what I'm going to be covering is what are Gatsby recipes, how they can be used, and some benefits of using them. And what I will try and do is show you some of the code that a recipe can take or contain of, and you can see probably like how you can utilize this in your project. So what is a Gatsby recipe? Well, the quickest way or the simplest way to kind of explain this is that it's a tool that allows you to automate common tasks together. So imagine you're doing lots of things like creating pages or adding a blog or adding a plugin or a node module or something, npm package, sorry. If you want to do all of that in a sort of combined view as well, it would allow you to do this. But the key thing that you need to do is you need to run this from the Gatsby CLI, because that's really important. And another way to kind of think of what Gatsby recipes are is that you can basically think of it as infrastructure as code. So it's very like you can write something to say, okay, I want it to do these couple of steps in the order, and then it should perform those steps automatically for you, and then voila, you get the end result. And one of the things that's its format is, so you could probably think of it as like in some infrastructure as code as YAML. You could probably think of it like that, but Gatsby recipes are written in Markdown and React components. So Markdown is very sort of easy to understand and use, and you can end up like, building your own recipe in that way. So the benefits of using this is it's going to save you a lot of time, because imagine you're doing installing, especially for the regular Gatsby users out there, if you're installing the Gatsby Google sitemap, the Gatsby helmet, React helmet, all of those things that you tend to be installing for every site that you end up creating. What you can do is obviously combine all of those together into one, and then end up actually running a single command that does all of these for you. And you can think of this as like almost a global template that could be used. And once you have these templates, you can update those templates and refine it to your benefits and your usages, really. So it really gives you the opportunity to kind of add in whatever you want in that template, and then you can end up swapping plugins as and when you need to. So when something new comes out and you want to incorporate it into your next projects, you don't need to kind of constantly keep doing that. So you can actually add it into the single sort of recipe itself, and then actually run that recipe itself. Okay, so I'm going to flip out from this presentation mode a bit, and I'm going to show you how look at some recipes themselves, see a small recipe and how it works, and maybe even try and see if we can run a recipe on a project. So I'm going to quickly come off this mode. So what I want to show here is one of the recipes that Gatsby have already provided. So they give you a few recipes that you can utilize, and in doing that, you can actually see that these are some of the things that are already working and in place to help you already get to an advanced point. So in this case, but this particular one is setting up the Gatsby theme blog. And this is the markdown file that you would probably be looking at. So this is a recipe markdown file. So it's just a markdown file itself. It's got some information at the top to tell you where you can get that particular blog information from. Then it talks about like how you can install the packages, the npm packages, and you can see here that it's installing 2 of them there. And then it gives you a little bit more information on maybe what you might want to be putting in the config file as well. And that allows you to do that. And then it also, in this case, so as we mentioned, or as I mentioned earlier, Gatsby Recipes allows you to do other things. So in this case, what this is allowing you to do is it's going to create a new blog post for you, which is really handy because it's getting the information or the content from a location and then going to create the blog post for you. So, and then what you do is you're giving some additional instructions of how we would normally run the set with Gatsby develop, and then how they can view that particular instance. So that's how you could kind of create a simple Gatsby recipe. Yes, sure. Sorry, I'll bump up the font size. Hopefully that's better. So basically on here you can see how it you can create this kind of recipe itself. Now if you wanted to look at where these recipes are currently from the installation of Gatsby, so let's just say if I go to my site and let's go to Gatsby recipes. Oops, sorry. Gatsby recipes. Oh, maybe I'm in the wrong project. Sorry. So let's go to CD. Let me have a look at that. But basically what we would allow you to do is if you go into node modules, you can see this as well. And while I quickly get that set up as well, is that if you go to Gatsby recipes is in here. What you'll see is a list of recipes that have been provided by Gatsby that you can see. So in this case, if you're into Cypress, which is a testing tool, you can see that here. You can see the way that they've created that. So should you ever need to, you know, create or see an example of a recipe that's already been provided by Gatsby, then you can do this by looking at some of the examples they've provided. Also, the community have done this as well. So they basically have actually ended up creating the recipes themselves. And you can kind of see those as well. So there's a few links, I think. Also, there's a link in the chat that Kyle's put in regarding a new blog post that's been you know, released today as well. But you can see here that the way that they've done this is a similar thing that we saw earlier, where we've got the npm package that wants to be installed or needs to be installed. A couple of instructions on how you do this. Locations to where some of the files are kept. And then it's just like a few more instructions. So you can see this one seems a lot more complex or complicated to the one that I've just shown earlier. But you can see that there's a lot of, you know, very important information that you can put into one, and one sort of recipe file, and then end up actually not having to do this again because it's there for you and it's ready. And we can have a look at another one as well. So let's have a look at the Gatsby theme notes. So this is just more of a simpler one as well. And you can see here that this is what you can kind of add as anything. So think of it as like a markdown file that you're adding some steps and instructions towards. And that's what allows you to kind of do those kind of things on there. So let me see if I can get the other bit working again. If not, we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, maybe let's move on to the next slide. So let me start presenting again. So with Gatsby recipes, one of the key things that you should really be taking away from this is the fact that Gatsby have already got some default recipes, as we saw earlier. Communities are developing more and more recipes. So there's recipes for you know, specific e-commerce packages and things like that as well. You don't need to be a master developer ninja, you know, when you're setting this up. And you start with like small recipes and then see how much time it would save. And creating multiple recipes, you know, you can be the chef, you can be the Gatsby chef, you can do what you want and how you'd like to do it, and not have to kind of like be sort of like restrictive. You can create your own recipes to your requirements. And that's a really sort of like a sort of valuable option for people to kind of utilize. So one of the recipes I was going to show as well is basically I've got one that I am planning to kind of create for a headless CMS called Kentico Content. So it doesn't matter what, you know, source you're looking at. So in this case, the way that I've done this is I basically have a source plugin that I can refer to, and then installing the package itself. I've got that there, and it's npm package, and then, you know, there's elements here where, you know, you need some dependencies. So in this case, a Kentico Content project, which is a headless CMS, you basically would need to kind of register your details and register for a trial version, and then you can start using it. But then I've also put here is like my own sort of steps on this, is to say, okay, what you need to do. So you could add in some configuration elements in here. So I've just put in some notes to say, hey, you need to kind of have a look at this and put in within your config file the correct project IDs and then language code names. And a few links on how to get there. And then at the bottom, it just obviously tells you how to kind of start using that site. So I created a very simple one there. And, you know, to run it, it will just be the case of, you know, doing Gatsby recipes and then pointing to that particular MDX file. And then you could see the options available for you on that. So let's go back to the presentation. And that's kind of it from my side, really. I've got a little 90 days trial if you want to get Kentico content, if you want to start using that. But, you know, Gatsby recipes are like massively getting popular, and you'll start like using them more and more, and it feels like it's something that's going to help you save time as well, lots and lots of time. So that's it on my side. I'm thinking if anyone's got any questions, either fire them in the chat or we can move on to the next presentation. So I'll wait a few minutes just in case there's some questions. I think Kyle's been answering some of them, which is great. Okay, so let's move on to the next presentation, which will be from Kyle Mathews. So what I'll do is I'll pass that over to Kyle. And hopefully, Kyle, you can start.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey, hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, Kyle, we can hear you. Thank you.
Awesome. So recognize several names in the chat. So good to be hanging out virtually. So this is a smaller group. I mean, I had a sort of a presentation ready, but is there anyone here who's not familiar with Gatsby? So I don't want to retread boring stuff. Well, not boring stuff. It's interesting. It's fun. But I mean, if you've already, you already know it. Yeah, because we can also just, well, I'll share my screen and then, yeah, I'll just kind of focus on sort of the newer, interesting updates. Yeah, straight into the good stuff. Thanks, Scott. Good idea. Okay, so yeah, we'll skip through some early stuff. So React, cool. Gatsby is, you know, React is just a view. Gatsby is everything else. You know, started Gatsby as a simple way to build websites with React. There's hundreds of thousands of Gatsby apps and websites. So some other lots of websites that you know. Do a demo, except you all used it, so there's not point in doing a demo. Yeah. So what does Gatsby do? You know, modern app tooling, community plugins, easy hosting, easy cheap hosting. You know, SEO. You know, load data from anywhere. Doing great performance by default. Then we're a startup. We have lots of people working on Gatsby full time. Lots of people contributing. 26,000 issues PRs, which is a lot. Yeah, and like we're a commercial open source company, which means that we invest a lot of money in making, you know, open source better, and then we build, you know, commercial cloud tools which augment Gatsby, which people find really valuable, want to pay us, and then we'll use that revenue to keep investing in Gatsby. So yeah, they complement each other and fuel each other. Yeah, collaboration, yeah, infrastructure collaboration. So it's similar to Zeit, Netlify, Heroku, but specifically for Gatsby, because the others are fairly generic, and we think that for sort of like content websites particularly, there's a lot of, you know, kind of things that people need to make it work really well. And And yeah, free tier. So our products are basically preview, which is like hot reloading for content. So you can be, editing something and see it live update. And then incremental builds, which makes Gatsby builds super fast. We launched in beta in April, approaching GA. If you haven't seen Will It Build, this is pretty cool. It's like benchmarks with a number of different integrations. So for example, like Contentful, a site of 8,000 pages, build times on data changes are 7 seconds. Data CMS, it's 5 seconds. Drupal, it's 11 seconds. WordPress, we're doing a bunch of work on that. It's like 8 seconds now, and it scales, quite nicely. So that's been a huge kind of engineering accomplishment making that happen, and it's really exciting to kind of see that happen. So Gatsby builds, Gatsby Cloud, we build sites and we deploy to a number of different partners for the actual hosting. You kind of bring your own hosting. And basically our goal is to, we see like what is known as like, what does a CMS look like in a cloud era? And I was like, what would WordPress look like if it was built today? And we think that, the templating would be powered by React, that use GraphQL for the data access layer, and that you need like a cloud service which like tightly integrates, the CMS and like other things which are like driving the site, and then helping kind of do content and a good content design and coding workflows. So a good way to think about this is like, once you go headless, like you lose things, like you lose preview and you lose fast updates to the site. And so Gatsby Cloud, our preview product, it fixes that button, and incremental builds, when you click update, then actually, quickly updates the website like people expect. I actually have a demo of how that actually works, so you can kind of see it. So this is the WordPress team at Gatsby showing off.
Being able to make use of WordPress plugin data from Gatsby.
So the first feature we're going to demo is preview. This is a feature that's been sorely missing in Gatsby source WordPress pretty much since the beginning. And in the new version of the new integration, it's just a native feature of the plugin, which is great. So on the left side here, we have our WordPress instance. On the right, we have our preview window. This looks like a regular WordPress preview. You have this bar at the top, so your admins have the regular experience of preview that they're used to. But actually, in the bottom here, we have a Gatsby site. So on the left here, if I go ahead and update the title, maybe add some new content, let's see, content update, click preview. This will refresh on the right side of the preview window, and you get your updated content right away.
So as a content creator, I get to use the CMS that I'm already familiar with. Mm-hmm. As a developer, I get to use React and the Gatsby plugin ecosystem to build the front end. And as an end user, I get to visit a very fast, static site. So it's kind of like a win all around. I get to create the content the way I'm used to it. I get to develop with awesome new modern tools, take advantage of that whole ecosystem. And as a user, man, these sites are just so fast. So we decided just like a content title update. What happens if we add an image in the content?
Yeah, so that's another great new feature. Any images which get added to HTML automatically become Gatsby images. So if we go ahead and grab this cute puppy picture, put it into our post, and click preview, we're going to see that show up in our preview window, and we're going to have an actual Gatsby image. So it's using the WordPress image sizes, so it's actually a bit sharper than WordPress, which is kind of cool, and that's because of Gatsby image. But if we come back to WordPress, we edit this image, and instead of using a medium size, we use a full size, and preview it again. We'll see that new size appear in our Gatsby site. And yeah, this is using Gatsby image. It's generating image sizes for all the different screen sizes. It's lazy loading all that great stuff.
This is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So huge progress in building like really, really good integrations between amazing CMSs like WordPress and Gatsby, which provides an amazing developer experience, and an amazing, kind of end user experience. So like Jason was saying there, it's sort of the best of all worlds. Yeah, and so yeah, kind of other updates, stuff we're working on. Kind of the grand arc, perhaps, for how we're thinking about things and working on things is that we first created, we wanted to like prove out the model, like does this the Gatsby source plugins, incremental builds, etc., does it all work, make sense, do people want to use it, whatever. And so hundreds of thousands of sites, I think we've proved that, like it's like a very good model for building, it's a good developer experience, produces great sites, and it's just sort of like a sustainable thing. And the Gatsby cloud, yeah, then we wanted to say, like, can we make builds dramatically faster than is possible anywhere else? And as you saw on Will It Build, like we've accomplished that. A large WordPress site, you click save and it's live on the internet in like 10 seconds. And that is when and you have live preview. And so those are like two big barriers to adopting this model, because people have done headless WordPress or headless CMSs for a long time, but it hasn't been something that's just like just works enough and kind of like covers all the bases that people can do all their sites this way. And that's what we want to get to. And then like the next big thing that we're working on is making all this like dramatically easier to adopt and use. So, and that's kind of the impetus behind recipes and other initiatives we're working on. Like we're working on like a Gatsby desktop tool that allows you to kind of manage your sites and to administer your sites. And the goal there is that like if you install WordPress or you go to Squarespace or something, or Shopify and create a new site, these tools, they just create things for you, set up a whole bunch of things for you, and so right out of the box you have a sophisticated, powerful environment. And yeah, and getting to that same point with Gatsby is possible, but it's pretty hard because you're now going from where one tool just sort of sets up all the things that you need for you to where Gatsby, it's like kind of, you have like, a box of Legos and you have this like paper sketch you made of your dream castle and you're trying to build it. And if you got like enough hours or days, to poke away at it, eventually you're going to get it built, maybe. You might have to learn a bunch of stuff and whatever, but you can get there. It is possible to get there. But we want everyone who's trying out Gatsby to have sort of a WordPress-like experience where out of the box, they have something that's like pretty sophisticated and nice and usable, and they can immediately hit the ground running and do something really cool with it. And, with Gatsby, you do get that, like with starters, you get that to some extent. But the problem with starters that we found is that they only can like control, basically what's on the file system. So I mean, Gatsby Start is like a static site generator, which traditionally, just uses, assets controlled by, in files. So like markdown files or JSON files or YAML files or something like that. But, most real world websites use kind of GUI CMSs because you have non-technical people who need to like own and run the site. And so starters can't create those headless CMSs or other services you might want in running your site and then hook them up so that everything is working. And so what recipes allows is for that sort of, click a button, set things up, and then off you go. So anyway, so we're doing a lot of work on that. Let me actually show another demo. Yeah, here we go. Real quick. So this is from last month, and it's still not quite ready to go, but it's pretty close. Wait a second. I didn't share with audio, so you're probably not hearing anything. Share screen. Let's check screen.
Yeah, I don't think any audio is coming through.
Sorry, the audio is coming through?
It's not.
Oh, it's not. Oh, sorry. Well, that's, see, it does have share computer sound. Yeah.
Title and a body field.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, we can hear that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let me just restart them real quick.
At the new admin version of recipes.
Yeah, so just a bit more context. Recipes right now runs on the CLI, but we've been working on, like I was saying, this new sort of GUI tool for managing sites. And part of that will include the ability to run recipes in the admin tool. And so this is a preview of what this is going to look like. Plus, it's also a preview of kind of setting up, like I was saying, when you create a new site, you might like, I'm creating a blog, but I want the blog to be managed in, headless CMS. And so you need to create that headless CMS, you need to create the type, etc. And so recipes is gaining the ability to do all these things for you. So, like we were talking about, like installing different things, like this kind of expands the idea of what you can quote unquote install to include anything that you might need for your site.
So here is a contentful blog recipe. You can quickly set up your contentful blog. Click this install recipe button whenever you're ready to go. It kind of lists all of the changes that it will make to your site. And then you go down here and there's a couple of steps. So the first step is to set up a new contentful space as well as the blog post content type. And then also we can put in the title and body, which is cool. And then here you can kind of see a preview of what it's going to do. So a contentful space, which is undefined, so we haven't put it up here. So actually let's do that first. So do blog space. So you can see it's updating that as we go. And then the type is just hard-coded. We don't get to change it, but it's going to add a title and a body field, as well as the entry, which is also undefined. So we can do that real quick. Like my first blog post, and then the body of the blog post. Yes. So you can see that updating there. And then also it needs to install Gatsby source contentful to pull data from our new contentful space. Because as you probably know, Gatsby uses source plugins to kind of automatically and very efficiently power your site with data from different sources. So this step, it installs the package and then it installs the plugin in your Gatsby config, so which is awesome. Doesn't require any configuration. It actually is going to use the space ID and access token from this contentful space when it's created. And I'll show you a bit later how that works. So yeah, let's install this. So now it's working away. It'll take a few minutes, well not a few minutes, but a few seconds to install the package and create the spaces using the Contentful API, and there we go. Okay, now if we look at Contentful, let's see the blog space that we just created. Click on the content model, we have the blog post, title and body content. And then if we go to content, we can see this new blog post that we created. My first blog post, the body of the blog post. Yes, awesome. Okay, so now let's look at the post. So if we do look at the diff, we can see for the Gatsby config, it installed it and it pulled in the space ID and the access token you need to access that. And then it installed the package. So just as we expect. So then if we run Gatsby develop, we should be able to see the blog post that we created and pull that in. And here we open up the site and there we go, my first blog post. Boom, it works. And here we can take a quick look at the recipe. We're not going to go too deep into how recipes work, but at a high level, it's just MDX, which is React component in Markdown. And through a custom React render that we created, you can actually do full-blown JavaScript. So here is the schema that we've defined. You pass it in contentful space. Actually, the contentful type here with the schema. So this contentful space, it's pulled from contentful space name, which is a input. So you can define inputs that then show up in the UI. Then down here, you can see the npm package and the Gatsby plugin. It's a pretty intuitive API. We've been, really pleased to watch screen recording other people trying it out, and they pick it up really quickly because the idea is that it's a React app development environment for your infrastructure. Infrastructure as code written in React.
So there you go. How do I see if there's participants who are waiting? Oh, okay. Okay, I found it actually. Yeah, someone just joined. So just to recap, Gatsby is React for websites. Gatsby Cloud is our opinionated way to, build, collaborate around, deploy your site. We released Preview late last year, which gives content editors, marketers sort of real-time preview of changes they're making in your CMS. We released incremental builds in beta in April, which drops build times for Gatsby sites from minutes to seconds. We see many people regularly building deploying their site in under 10 seconds, which is phenomenal. And takes kind of the static model from being appropriate to a subset of sites that don't change data quickly or don't need preview to something that is a full-blown kind of CMS replacement. We're also doing a lot of work with like WordPress and Drupal so that they have full support, along with many other kind of integration tech partners that we have. And yeah, now we're doing a lot of work. We feel like we've created a excellent solution. There's hundreds of thousands of people who are using it, and now the focus is like, okay, how do we make this much more straightforward to adopt? Because if you're using the WordPress or Drupal or Shopify or Squarespace, you click a button and you have something that's working. And we want to do the same thing for this sort of distributed CMS where Gatsby's running part, some other services running some other part. You have multiple services that are plugged into Gatsby. It's like setting that up can be pretty intricate manual work, and we want to make that automatic and reliable. And we're also working on new low-code tools, like kind of admin tools for your Gatsby site, so that you can run recipes, you can manage your plugins, you can connect different services, all from a GUI environment. And that is my talk. So we could do some Q&A. I think we're scheduled for, how long are we scheduled? For another half hour or something. So we have plenty of time. And yeah, so there's some questions in the chat. I mean, maybe we could just turn on audio too. Let people, we're not a large group maybe, so we could just chit chat a little bit. See, Scott, you asked, what is the appetite for, what is this, Scott? Relationship team working with businesses. Yeah, I forget, I don't remember the context. What is this?
Yeah, sorry, Kyle. I think that was when you were demoing Gatsby Cloud. Was it the CMS one? One with Jason and I don't know who the other guy was.
And Tyler, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just curious as to what the appetite is for businesses which currently have like a WordPress site and have decided they want to have their front end refreshed and just done in Gatsby. So I was just curious as to where it is, because I know some like freelancers who are doing quite a lot of work with it, but I think that's just with the plugin and Gatsby. So with regard to the actual what was the product? Gatsby Cloud, and sorry, no, what was the actual product? Sorry, that you were demoing there. It wasn't. It was. It was WordPress, and it was the real time updating. So, which one was that? It wasn't the.
Yeah,
it was Gatsby Cloud, right?
WordPress and Gatsby Cloud, because Gatsby Cloud provides the real time preview and the kind of instant builds.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah. We there's already like a lot of people. I mean, there's like hundreds of new people a week. Just from telemetry, there's hundreds of people. Trying out the combination. We're seeing lots of WordPress sites WordPress Gatsby sites get launched. We think it's going to be an exceptionally popular approach because WordPress is the world's most popular CMS by far, and so there's tons of people who are familiar with it. They like it. It's a great CMS, and everyone agrees WordPress is a great CMS. The downside is more the developer experience is archaic because you don't have easy git control. You can't like version your code as easily. Setting up the local dev environment's weird. Anyway, so you're using PHP templates. I mean, there's a lot of weird things that just feel wrong now. And then also like actually managing and hosting the site. There's security issues. There's like it's a lot harder to make the site fast. Hosting's more expensive, especially if you start getting traffic. So all those things go away with Gatsby. And so what we like to think is it's like you get the best of all worlds. Is that you can like swap out the PHP front end for WordPress with Gatsby without anybody noticing. That's our goal. Is that there's literally you literally don't even have to tell people that it's running Gatsby because that the integration is so good. They just they click on preview and they're like, cool, preview. They click save, and it just sort of spins a bit until the update is deployed to the internet. So I mean, I would dive right in and try it out. The new stuff that was being demoed, it's the version 4 of Gatsby Source WordPress, and this one is based on WP GraphQL, not the built-in WordPress API, REST API, just because we found a lot of limitations with the REST API, and we hired the maintainer of WP GraphQL just so that he could drive a lot of the improvements, for additional speed, for preview support, et cetera, et cetera. And so, the integration is getting very, very nice. And by all means, jump in.
Okay. Yeah. I was just curious as to. I'm not really on like hard numbers or anything like that. Just the general adoption. I mean, like you said, it's a very big, WordPress takes up a lot of the web. So I'm guessing everyone's going to. I mean, what other alternatives are there if there's not, if you don't want to stick with PHP on the front end? Is there? I mean, there's other frameworks, but not anything which is going to be as integrated as Gatsby, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because I mean, there's always been the REST API, but when you implement a headless, React or headless Vue, whatever thing, whatever the framework you're using, there's a lot of stuff that just don't work by default. And the biggest two are, preview and kind of fast updates of your stuff. But there's also a lot of other stuff, like making redirect support or, something that Tyler Barnes on our team was, just finished creating is like built-in support for like the template switcher so that, the content person can be like, okay, I'm creating a new page, and then they can have multiple templates they can choose from, and they can just like switch between them, and then off it goes. So there's all these like little niceties that, people use to WordPress, like power users of WordPress expect, and then by default, you're just not going to get that, and they'll be like, "Oh, why is this broken?" But with enough elbow grease, it'll be like a one-to-one swapping, which would be sweet.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I've just got a bit of a kind of more picking your brain, I guess. Really, one of the things that we often have at the moment is the idea of live preview just being expected, just because it's such
Mm-hmm.
A big part of CMS, and
Right.
people just come to expect it now. And obviously, understandably, the Gatsby Cloud product is obviously, it has a monthly payment for and a usage that kind of would be adequate for most websites that are being edited. Have you seen much pushback from, I guess, users or developers or businesses in terms of using Gatsby Cloud as opposed to kind of alternative options? I know there's the environment variable, I think that's documented, that I didn't realize existed, and you corrected me on Twitter at one point. Which I know there's been a post on that about using it with Netlify as well. So I'm just curious as to if you've had too much much in the way of pushback on that.
I mean, not really, because whatever you do, your site's going to have to go somewhere. It's like WordPress has to have a host. Gatsby has to go on a CDN. So I mean, regardless of what you're doing, the site needs cloud services to make it work. And so we don't feel like preview is that exceptional in that regard. Like, it's the same. Like, the only difference is it's now not bundled together, into WordPress. It's like a separate thing. But, at the end of the day, I mean, you have preview, it's like, if you just kind of zoom back a little bit, like, okay, if there's preview, whether it's in WordPress or whether it's in Gatsby Cloud, it's still, still the same preview. The main pushback we get, though, is the price, because we launched with like $99 a month, and the feedback we gotten is that that's just too high for many projects. Which, to be fair, I mean, we did, we were aware of this. Like, we were pretty sure that it was high, but we wanted to launch with that just because, like, when you're a new service, there's just like a lot of stuff to figure out, and so we intentionally priced high just to sort of limit, the number of people that would use Gatsby Cloud, while we're kind of like getting the platform so it's scalable and reliable and so on. But that is on the roadmap to, have a lower price point, so that basically sort of the entry paid, usage for preview is in line with kind of other kind of professional cloud services you might use to run your site. But yeah, I mean, our focus, though, like I said, is like it's to create an amazing experience for everybody, and we think it's pretty reasonable, that there will be a free tier for smaller, kind of non-commercial sites, but like once it's like a commercial thing, paying some amount for preview makes sense, because you're going to be paying something somewhere for something equivalent.
Cool. No, that makes sense. I think it's interesting to know there's going to be a lower tier coming down the line, because I think that is like that little void there. It does need to be filled by something, so that'll be really useful.
Yeah. I mean, we very much want Gatsby Cloud to be used by anybody using Gatsby, and we're getting there as fast as we can. But yeah. Cool. Other questions?
I'm just going through the newsletter as well, and static query's been taken out of Webpack's kind of cool. So I'm just running the build now, and I use it quite heavily. So that's cool. There were some issues with Lighthouse changing to 6.1. Do you know? Is that a Google thing, or is that because nothing in Gatsby's changed to affect it, is it?
No, Google, because Lighthouse is run by the Google Chrome team. And they changed the formula pretty dramatically, which basically just dropped a lot of people's scores. And they particularly penalized, any sort of blocking time from JavaScript. So if you have JavaScript that's like running at startup, that's like a much heavier weighted negative. So, if you have more than like a few hundred kilobytes of JavaScript that you're loading, then, that's going to start eating into your performance score pretty quickly. And the other part is just the largest content paint, like LCP. And so people whose sites just had like late arriving things or other kind of like bouncy type stuff, they started penalizing that a lot more. Because I mean, the goal is that, you know, you load a site and it just feels smooth. And you know, what they found is that people could have good performance scores, but it's like kind of like jumpy and weird, you know, when it's loading. And also people on slower devices, especially, you load it, and then if there's a lot of JavaScript, it's just sort of like the screen is frozen. You're like, you're trying to touch it on the smartphone, and like nothing's moving until the JavaScript is ready. And so they're like, okay, like we're not accounting for these kind of problems as much as we should, given like how many people are on slower devices, and just like you know smartphone usage is just becoming a larger and larger part of the web. And so they decided to kind of change the performance scores to do that. But anyway, so yeah, so there's, you know, anyway, so people who thought like, oh, everything's fine, you know, now they're like, oh no, like, is my site bad now or something? And you know, that kind of depends. Like, if you thought your site was fast before, and performance scores they're pretty aggressive. Like, they are aimed at sort of like the low end of the smartphone market. And so depending on what you're doing, that may or may not matter. I mean, you know your situation best of everyone, like whether it makes sense to do something about that. So if you're just like, the only people that ever look at my site are on desktops in office, you know, parks or something, then like who cares? None of this really matters. But if it's just some sort of like news site, or you know, something else that's getting like a broad, diverse group of people visiting, then yeah, you should probably care, because it is going to be impacting users. So it's kind of, you know, Lighthouse is a clue to what you should be doing towards improving your site, but it's not some sort of absolute whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's been mainly hit by, I feel like all React-based sites got hit pretty hard with it, just from the hydration runtime at the beginning. I think the biggest issue we're seeing really is simply the impact of clients' expectations. They just expect it to be in the 80s and the 90s, especially considering that was quite easily achievable with Gatsby prior to the 6.1 update. I'm just wondering, like, how much can even be done on the Gatsby side? Because it feels like it's more of a React runtime problem, so to speak, to try the initial blocking time.
I mean, you can always look at, I mean, it's always good to audit your templates, your components, you know, because a bare bones Gatsby site is still, you know, 9900 whatever performance score. So it's definitely possible with React. But it's very easy, you know, as you're developing stuff and you're just like, oh, throw an animation library, throw in, you know, CSS and JS, throw in this, throw in that. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what happened? My performance score, you know, just like slipped into the crapper. And so, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So just like auditing what's going on and seeing if there's ways of like, you know, there's good tools for analyzing your bundles to figure out how to improve that. But yeah, I mean, what Gatsby, you know, we as a framework can do, there's ongoing work to just do smarter bundling strategies. So one thing that we shipped recently is we now pull out polyfills for older browsers and don't ship those to more modern browsers. So a lot of sites that's like, you know, 50, 60, 70 kilobyte drop in site, well, more like 40 or 50. Anyways, so that's a nice win. The Google Chrome team did a bunch of research on like kind of bundling strategy, namely around just doing a bit more granular bundles than we had. And so that also dropped, like GatsbyJS.org, I think dropped like 100 kilobytes of JavaScript on the homepage from that change. But yeah, the biggest thing probably is like React. They're working on like a partial hydration strategy in which you can hydrate, you know, some React components that are like more critical. So if they have like inputs in them or other stuff like that, and then gradually kind of pull in the rest of them. And that's going to be by far the best way to improve this, because then Gatsby can just sort of automatically guess, you know, initially sort of like, okay, like these seem like top of the folders. I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but there'll be like some sort of like semi-automated / manual way of doing this. And it'll be pretty straightforward, just to be like, annotate like, okay, this component, people actually are going to click on and do stuff, and then everything else, you know, lazy loaded in. And yeah, and then we're pretty fine at that point. Because it's like web performance is a funny thing because there's this mad rush at the very beginning. You know, it's like this like traffic jam, you know, downloading stuff and having the processor, you know, on the device, like, you know, get everything going. And but then once that's done, there's just like eons of time to do whatever. Because, you know, you're like, everything's got to happen in a second, but then, you know, the user stares at something for like 5 seconds, which is like, you know, anyway. So the main thing is just to avoid contention as much as possible in the initial bit. And so delaying anything helps out with that. But yeah, and like you're saying, the big problem is that with React, like we don't have the option of delaying a lot of stuff that we know isn't necessary. But once they ship partial rotation, we can.
That's cool. I didn't know that was coming down the line from React, so it's really interesting.
Yeah, they've got. I mean, they got a bunch of stuff in flight right now that's like very complicated and very hard to land. But yeah, hopefully it's coming to like React 17. So that'll be sweet.
What's the roadmap for Gatsby? Are we on version 2 now?
Yeah, version 2. Yeah.
I saw.
Yeah, we've been in version 2 for a while.
Yeah, I saw an RFC for Webpack 5 for the next version. You still going to be sticking with Webpack for the next version? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're always looking around because there's a lot of cool innovations in sort of the bundler technology space. But yeah, Webpack is good enough, fast enough, and big enough, and we got a lot of like cool stuff that we've done with it. Yeah, Webpack 5 is a really nice upgrade over Webpack 4. So it's a little bit TBD when we'll do the upgrade. We got a bunch of stuff in flight, but yeah, that'll be coming sooner or later.
Is there going to be breaking changes like there was from 1 to 2, or?
Like the next major release of Gatsby?
Yeah. So I remember the upgrade path from 1 to 2 or from 0 to 1 was quite painful with the GraphQL layer being added and things like that. So just wondering if there's going to be, you know, once there's like a version bump, if everyone's going to be bringing their sites in line with the new version.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, 0 to 1 was a huge change. It was basically a rewrite. 1 to 2 was a lot more minor. It wasn't a ton of differences in that change. And if anything, 2 to 3 is going to be even lighter. Like I mean, we've been on version 2 for when was this? 2 years now. Wow, that's great. Well, it'll be 2 years in September. So almost 2 years on the same version. And the reason is just like we haven't had any breaking changes. Like nothing has needed to ship change. So I mean, we're on like our 24th minor now, I think. So we've been able to ship a ton of things with the existing model. And the main breaking changes will be pretty low level. One thing that we found with, you know, all the work we're doing on incremental builds and like incremental builds and just like working, like, you know, improving different source plugins is there's just too much ambiguity sometimes around how to build a really great, you know, source plugin that's like really, really fast and really scalable. And so we want to put in some more constraints, I guess, so that like source plugins are super awesome at whatever scale and can drive preview on incremental builds. There's also like some caching stuff because like we want to do one big problem is partial cache clearing because people, you know, are fiddling away and like things are fine, but then like you add a new package or something and we just delete all the cache. And then it can take a while to kind of like recreate that. And there's a few strategies for improving that. One of them, which is that we want to do more like in development, we just do like lazy query running. So we don't have to like recreate the whole state of things. But also it's just to not just be smarter about maintaining the cache. So it's like, you know, be able to figure out like, okay, this change did not affect any of the cache, so we're not going to delete any of it. Or you did upgrade a plugin, which is going to affect, you know, something. So yeah, and then we've also found like looking into that, we found difficulties in kind of implementing those smarter cache clearing strategies, just because of the ambiguity in some of the APIs. But yeah, but you as an end user, it'll probably be 100% seamless switching over.
Is there going to be any dynamic query variables?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that
that going to be a
static
thing?
queries? I was literally about to ask that.
Sorry, Richard.
No, by all means.
Yeah, that's like I mean, that is a difficult problem. We've gone back and forth a bunch on different ways of doing it and haven't found anything just yet that's like works well. The trick is that it's like yeah, I mean, the trick is like, you know, we run queries at build time, but the dynamism, you know, people naturally expect it to happen at runtime. So it's like it's in the client and then it can like figure out what it wants. And so one thing that's more approachable is like just allowing static queries to take like static, you know, arguments. But true sort of like dynamism would require a running GraphQL API that the client can hit. And so that is something that, you know, we batted around for a while, which is that there's like a kind of a API mode that you can just run like Gatsby API or Gatsby GraphQL, and it, you know, kind of like spins up the source plugins and everything, but then just like sitting there waiting for queries. And like, because I think, well, I'd actually be curious what your most common use cases for wanting kind of arguments and static queries are, but I think a lot of it is just around images. And you could, okay, there you go. So yeah, so if you could just like have the server running and like it's behind a cache, so that you could just be like, give me an image that's 300 pixels by 400 pixels or something, and shove it into Gatsby image, then yeah, that seems like it would solve a lot of people's problems.
So yeah, I think early use cases for me is like, why can't I pass this image I want to query? But then now we know that the GraphQL queries are taken out of build time, so they're not even part of the sort of the runtime stuff. But that was one of the sort of early things.
Just to jump on that as another use case. So something that we do, so we quite heavily use content as a CMS, and what we would like to be able to do often is co-locate the query with the component that's being rendered based on some content item in there. And obviously parameters. So those parameters are only going to be static at build time, effectively.
Yeah.
But we need to, or would like to be able to push them into a co-located query rather than have to be at page level, so in order for it to be dynamic. That's probably been the main use case where we've kind of really wanted that. And I don't really see
which CMS are you?
Content, Kentico content.
Oh, okay, yeah. Actually, on that specific question, we have been doing kind of like content-driven code splitting, so that you're depending on what like things the content editor does, it'll pull in the components necessary to render this. Just saw a demo. Anyway, so one of the engineers has been working on that. I just saw a demo of it earlier, and so that should be out in the next month or so.
That's brilliant. I just kind of had to hack around that with loadable components recently.
yeah, because it's pretty painful, because the only option right now is basically just pull them all in, and then if your content type gets complicated enough, that could be like, back to the Lighthouse issue, it can get like this massive blob of JavaScript to power a bunch of stuff that is rarely used. And so yeah, so the new method is basically you just sort of like query stuff, and then you can like get the module. You just say like, okay, if this is here, get this component. If this is here, get this component. And then it just ensures that before it tries to render the page, that all of the, the little code bundles for each component are loaded. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
I'm assuming that would handle CSS as well. So the use, I literally just went through this pain like last week.
Yeah.
I ended up having to use loadable components to basically async everything, and then added a bit of a Webpack hook/hack to inline the CSS modules that were being imported, so that they could at least be loaded and not be affected by the order they were loaded in case there was anything that was targeting similar elements, which generally is okay with CSS modules, but we did have some like externally referenced CSS which wasn't modules, so it did have issues. So that sounds like it would potentially fix a lot of that and actually be built into Gatsby. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I think with a lot of and the ideas too is that actually I'm not really sure about this, but I think we can make, I mean, the intention is that for sort of established CMSs with like established patterns for doing this, is that it could just be sort of baked in, maybe even directly into the source plugin, so that you could just, like this content is from this, and this is from this, and this and this, and then all you have to do. So another effort too that's related to this is that GraphQL queries will be able to return components. So you could literally just say, I want this content, and then like one of the field would be just literally component, and then rendering it would just be looping over your content and being like, render component, render component, render component, render component. So there's no sort of passing data around. It's just sort of baked in. And then the same thing with like Gatsby image. So it's like you just like query an image, but you just get the component, and so you don't have to like pull the data off like and pass it in as props. It's just like literally render the component that's returned from the GraphQL query. So
that's very cool.
Yeah, cool. I noticed the dynamic routes have been merged as well, Kyle. So you can generate pages directly from your data. I played with it, I don't know, about a month ago now when I saw it on
awesome.
one of the branches. I'm not sure if it's changed much since then, but that's a really handy
a little bit. Yeah, it's largely the same. Yeah. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, that's a really nice kind of DX improvement, because our goal is that like, create pages in Gatsby Node. It's pretty low level. It lets you do whatever you want, but what we want is more APIs where it's sort of like Happy Easy Path gets like a very straightforward, easy API, and then you have a sharp knife if you ever want to do something very specific. And so with this new one, you're like, I'm doing blog posts. You just do, the type of data, and then you should then just say the field that's going to be driving the thing. And so it's a lot simpler.
Is there a performance improvement on that as well? Because you're not using Gatsby Node, or is it just using Gatsby Node in the background?
Right now it is, but in the future, we will be able to make it with incremental builds. We'll be able to make it faster, because like one of the slowdowns with incremental builds as your site gets larger is that we recreate pages every time, instead of just saying, okay, from data, from the data change, we only know that these pages changed. So so like 100,000 page site, for example, will take like 45 seconds to recreate the pages on every build. But one of the engineers working on this stuff, he prototyped, what it will be in the future, basically. So even like 100,000 page site, just because we don't have to recreate all the pages, a data change took like 5 seconds to kind of build. And so anyway, so we're not doing this initial release, but this sort of more efficient page creation under the hood will be coming. And that was one of the goals of like having an abstraction layer, is that we have a higher level of abstraction, then you can like do optimizations lower down to kind of make things more efficient. But you adopt it now, and then the whole thing will get a lot more efficient over time.
Cool.
So random question of something I ran into on the most recent build that I did was static pages is in like your index or 404, things like that. I don't know if it's something I missed, but they don't have any context object, or at least there doesn't seem to be a way of actually setting it for one of those. And obviously it would be a static value, but one scenario we had was we were wanting to have a component use the page context data. And it would work for basically anything we created through the create page API because we create it and give it default values if needed. And we just wanted to be able to give the static pages default values so that it would still have them there available. But it didn't seem to be a thing. Again, I don't know if it was just something I missed or if it felt like a little bit of a hole in the API.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing. I mean, there's like a funny workaround for doing that, where you can do like on create pages and then modify the context for those. But I mean, given that they're just
I did check that,
standalone,
but I don't think on create page got called for the static ones. When I was looking, I'm fairly sure it didn't. At least when I was trying to debug it, I couldn't see them being called for those.
But I mean, I guess my question would be, why don't you just put it right in the component or something? Because you could just do.
It was because
context equals whatever.
Yeah, it was because, and this might be hacky, or it might just be that I was trying to be too careful, but we were using the is it the shared layout plugin where it wraps the page, where it wraps the page root, so it's a level above, I think, where you could do that.
Yeah.
Because we wanted it basically, it was something for that. It was some settings for the header ultimately.
Gotcha.
We wanted to persist that across pages and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very specific situation where we wanted to be able to set data at the highest possible level without causing re-renders on either page load or hydration or anything like that. Again, very specific. So it might not be relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it should. Yeah, on create page should let you modify the context. Because what you got to do is basically you just create the page again. Yeah, here we go. I'll just share my screen real quick. Yeah, so you just do, you delete it, and then you recreate it with, I don't know who wrote this, but here's House Gryffindor. Yeah. So
this is what I was looking at, and I'm, at least when I tried it, I'm fairly sure it didn't run for the index in the 404 page. I will double check, and if it is the case, I'll see. I might just create an issue on GitHub for it. But
yeah, then that's definitely a bug if it's not working. Because I've definitely heard of people doing similar stuff to that. So I know at one point it worked, but yeah, the test coverage might not cover a specific case or something. Cool. Any other last questions? Otherwise, I might go get lunch.
I've got one.
Lunchtime here.
And it's more to do with like Gatsby Future and things like that. So like you're obviously looking into expanding recipes and a new version of Gatsby, etc. Are you looking to venture into other areas like maybe a Gatsby CMS or along the lines to have an all-in-one house kind of platform?
Yeah. We get asked that a fair bit, and I think there's, I guess my answer is generally it's like, if we were to build a CMS, which one would we build? Because that's we look around and we see people using literally hundreds of different CMSs with Gatsby, and all of them have sort of their own place, whether from like some sort of technological advantage, like some sort of like, data modeling, some sort of like workflow support that they have for people doing things. And so we think that it's better, like Gatsby gets more powerful by integrating with more CMSs than if we were to like try to pick a category of CMS and then build one ourselves. It's like WordPress. WordPress is incredibly popular, has like 2 decades of, kind of thinking and refinement in it. And it'd be extremely hard for us to kind of duplicate, what WordPress has done. And so, so like so what we do instead is like we build Gatsby Cloud. We've hired a couple engineers to, work full time on the WordPress integration. And now it's quite nice. It's very usable. And we think that's like a better use of our time, because now you can like say, okay, I'm going to ship a simple, kind of blog / marketing site and power it with WordPress, turn it on, put it on Gatsby Cloud, hand it off to the client, and then I'm done. And that's awesome. But then like, the next week you're like, okay, now I need to, build this like enterprisey, content publishing platform with like all these like complicated content types and like dozens of editors and all sorts of like strange stuff that's happening. And then you pick like a much more sophisticated CMS, that can handle that sort of setup. But either way, you're using Gatsby and React and GraphQL. And so, you carry a lot of familiarity from project to project to project that you wouldn't otherwise. And so, yeah, anyways, that's our take.
Great. So I guess like quite close to end of time as well, but any other questions from anyone? No.
Cool. Well, it's been fun hanging out with my English buddies. Yeah, I'm gonna travel all these days. So I'm like, I've been going to like England or London specifically, like every year for like 3 or 4 years for whatever combination of reason. So I'm like, no, I'll go back. So as good as it gets.
I say as a northern, I'm just gonna have to say that you need to come to the north at some point as well.
Well, I really do. Yeah, I've made it to the Cotswolds, so I went hiking out there. So I feel like that's something. But yeah, I haven't gone north yet. Someday.
I'm really aware of the time. I know there was the Gatsby Days 2019 in London, and obviously 2020 happened. Any plans for anything in the future? And
as soon as we can, get it going again. I mean, that's we think they're hugely helpful for everybody, to be running Gatsby Days. So yeah, I would really love to come back. And that's the plan, as soon as we can.
Just one more for me. Sorry. With regards to like adoption, maybe Richard could sort of chime in on this as well. I know there's a massive uptake in the States, but there doesn't seem to be a great deal here in the UK, like specifically around Jamstack. And I'm seeing a slow uptake. Are you doing anything with regards to like PR, or are you pushing it this way, or is it just you're just letting it go by osmosis to everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of sort of mostly like social media. I would though, like, just looking at, we have telemetry and where people are using it, and there's definitely a lot of people in the UK. I think the UK is like, the US is the biggest country, using Gatsby, but the UK is like second or third. So yeah, I mean, proportionally feels roughly. I haven't looked at the exact numbers in a long time, but my memory is that like proportional to the population of the US versus the UK, it was quite large. So I think it just might be that like we're noisy people, so like I can't hear anything because of that freaking din coming across the Atlantic, can't hear myself think, I just want to shut the door and relax a little bit in my garden.
I found some good sites. There's quite a popular health food store here in the UK called Holland and Barrett, which I know uses it on their site. So that's quite a good e-commerce one to have on there. Is there any other sort of larger ones you know of, like UK based, that are using it?
There's some. I know. I'm trying to remember. I know there's some other. There's like, what's your grocery chain starts with an S?
Oh, Morrison's. Morrison's use it as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Morrison's use it actually.
I don't know if you guys know Matt Kane. He's in Southwest. Anyways, he joined Gatsby end of last year. Anyway, Yeah, he's super cool. If you ever happen to run into him, but anyways, he's the main one that keeps updating us when there's interesting, UK sites to get launched in Gatsby. But yeah, it's like these days, like I mean, there's so many Gatsby sites being launched that I can't keep track even close. So
yeah,
there's probably there's definitely good stuff.
Yeah, I guess that's to chime in. I think we're definitely seeing more and more growth in it. I think it's more a case of people becoming more and more aware of it. From at least the client base is becoming more and more aware of it. And I think also it's for the agency point of view, it's where I think agencies are becoming more and more confident in actually being able to sell it and be able to communicate the benefits over a traditional CMS. So it's definitely maturing. I think we're seeing more opportunities to actually use Gatsby over kind of more of a traditional CMS approach that we kind of have historically focused on.
Yeah, and like I was saying, like our goal is that you don't really have to sell it, because 2 years ago it was like this big song and dance to be like, pretty please, I know it's gonna suck, but you'll get these advantages. And so our goal is like, our goal is like right now, it's like, oh, it'll be minorly painful, there'll be a few weird things, and then eventually our goal is that you don't even tell people you're using Gatsby, because like, who cares? It's like, it's just a CMS, like everything works the way that they're used to. And then you can just very confidently just do what you want.
Yeah, I think
they'll have a great experience, you'll have a great experience, everyone will have a great experience.
Yeah, I think the pitch is less on Gatsby, because generally speaking, they probably won't care about the tech that we're using as long as the result's good. It's more been a pitch on headless, I think, is the I imagine more of the challenge, and that is more around the editing experience on in my experience.
Yeah, exactly. But
like I say, the lack of preview, which is being solved. So
yeah, exactly. So that's
easier.
My point. It's like headless. Does anyone even know what headless is? I mean, nobody knows, other than they go to this website, they change some stuff, and it somehow ends up on the website. So as long as they have preview, and as long as it ends up on the website in a consistent, reliable fashion, it's all goobity-got to them. So
100%.
Yeah. So we just want to make it perfectly seamless, and then you can do whatever you want.